The California Men's Colony in San Luis Obispo, Cell Block D, Row 7, number 247. Inside this 8 by 10 concrete box that has been home for 25 years, a man sits on the edge of a narrow bunk, watching the news on a small television that crackles with poor reception. The headline reads, "Iron Man breaks box office records again." The actor on screen, the one who took the role that might have been his, waves to crowds at another movie premiere, another celebration of a career built on the ashes of someone else's dreams. His name is Robert Downey Jr., inmate number 24, 7,891, and for the past 25 years, he has been watching the world move on without him. The cell is sparse, utilitarian, designed to contain rather than comfort. A metal toilet that hasn't worked properly since 2003. A small sink with rust stains. A desk bolted to the wall where he writes letters that no one answers anymore. The walls are covered with magazine clippings, not of his own career, which ended before most of his fellow inmates were born, but of the career he might have had. Iron Man, The Avengers, Marvel movies that earned billions while he counted days and measured his life in the rhythm of prison schedules. Iron Man, The Avengers, Marvel movies that earned billions while he counted days on a calendar that seemed to move backward instead of forward. Each box office record, each critical acclaim, each award ceremony was a reminder of the life that existed in a parallel universe where judges showed mercy and second chances were actually second chances. 25 years, a quarter century, enough time for an entire generation to grow up, without knowing his name, without understanding that once, before the uniform and the number and the concrete walls, he was someone who mattered. The news segment ends with a report about Marvel's latest project. Robert reaches for the remote and turns off the television. But the silence that follows is somehow worse than the noise. In silence, he can hear the echo of the judge's voice from July 16, 2001, the day his life ended, and his sentence began. "Mr. Downey, you have appeared before this court multiple times. You have been given chance after chance, treatment after treatment, opportunity after opportunity. The court has shown patience, understanding, and mercy. But mercy without accountability becomes enablement, and this court will not enable your destructive behavior any longer." Robert had stood in handcuffs, wearing the orange jumpsuit that would become his uniform for the next 25 years, listening to the judge enumerate his failures: drug possession, violation of parole, missed court appearances, a pattern of behavior that the judge described as a complete disregard for the legal system and society's attempts to help you. "You are clearly a talented individual," the judge continued, "but talent without responsibility is just wasted potential, and society cannot continue to pay the price for your potential." Robert's lawyer had argued for rehabilitation, for treatment, for one more chance, but the judge had heard those arguments before, had granted those requests before, had watched Robert violate every agreement and break every promise. "The court sentences you to 25 years in state prison, with no possibility of parole. I hope you use this time to find the help you clearly need, but more importantly, I hope society gets the protection it deserves from your choices." 25 years. The number hung in the courtroom air. Robert's knees buckled slightly, caught by the bailiff. In the gallery, his mother began to cry, not theatrical crying, but the deep, silent grief of someone watching their child disappear forever. That was July 16, 2001. Robert was 36 years old. He would be 61 when he was released, if he lived that long. The first few years were the hardest: withdrawal, depression, the slow, grinding realization that this wasn't another stint in rehab, another temporary setback, another story he'd tell on talk shows about hitting rock bottom and climbing back up. This was his life now. This concrete box, these metal bars, this uniform, this number. He tried to maintain hope, wrote letters to agents, to directors, to anyone who might remember him, planned comebacks, imagined roles, held on to the fantasy that 25 years was just a very long intermission in a career that would resume when the curtain went up again. But Hollywood has a short memory for failure and no memory at all for absence. By 2005, his name appeared only in Where Are They Now? Articles that treated him as a cautionary tale rather than a comeback story. By 2008, when Iron Man premiered with another actor in the title role, Robert had been forgotten entirely. He watched the movie on the prison television, surrounded by inmates who had no idea they were sitting next to the man who was originally supposed to play Tony Stark. The role fit the other actor like a glove, the charm, the wit, the redemption arc of a man who rebuilt himself from the ground up. It should have been his redemption arc. It should have been his comeback. It should have been his second chance. The irony was profound and painful. Tony Stark was a man who fell from grace and redeemed himself through heroism. Robert Downey Jr. was a man who fell from grace and disappeared entirely. The character he was meant to play became everything he was meant to become: wealthy, respected, beloved, transformed. The Marvel Cinematic Universe exploded into the biggest franchise in entertainment history. Iron Man led the Avengers, saved the world multiple times, earned the actor who replaced Robert hundreds of millions of dollars, and the kind of cultural immortality that comes with playing an iconic character. Robert watched every movie from his cell, not out of masochism, but out of a strange sense of connection to a life he never lived. Each film was a glimpse into an alternate universe where the judge had shown mercy, where he'd gotten clean, where talent had triumphed over addiction. By 2015, the other actor was one of the highest paid performers in Hollywood. Robert was eligible for a new cell in the geriatric wing of the prison, designed for inmates whose bodies were breaking down faster than their sentences. Prison ages you differently than the outside world. Not just physically, though. 25 years of institutional food and limited exercise had taken their toll, but psychologically, spiritually, in ways that can't be measured or quantified. Robert's hair had gone completely gray. His face was lined with decades of regret, and his voice, when he used it at all, had lost the quick wit and easy charm that once made him one of Hollywood's most charismatic performers. He'd become institutional, dependent on routine, suspicious of change, more comfortable in his cell than anywhere else. The outside world had evolved in ways he couldn't imagine. Technology, culture, politics, everything had moved forward while he remained frozen in 2001. The other inmates knew him as Bob, the quiet old guy who kept to himself and sometimes talked about movies from the 80s and 90s. None of them knew he'd been famous once. None of them would have believed it if they'd been told. Letters from family stopped coming around year 10. His son Indio, who was 7 when Robert was sentenced, grew up without a father, graduated from high school, went to college, got married, had children of his own. Robert was a grandfather to kids he'd never met, a stranger with their last name who sent birthday cards from prison that went unopened. His ex-wife had remarried within 5 years, moved across the country, changed her name, started a new life that had no room for the ghost of Robert's presence. She'd done interviews early in his sentence about addiction and family, and the price of loving someone who can't love themselves. But those interviews stopped when the questions stopped being asked, when Robert ceased to be newsworthy, when his absence became more notable than his presence had ever been. In 2018, when the Marvel Universe reached its climax with movies that earned billions worldwide, Robert was transferred to the prison library. It was considered a privilege, a quiet job for a model prisoner who'd caused no trouble for nearly 2 decades. He spent his days organizing books that other inmates rarely read, in a room that was quieter than his cell, but somehow more lonely, surrounded by stories of adventure and romance and redemption. He was a character who'd been written out of his own narrative. Sometimes visitors came to the library, family members of other inmates, volunteers, social workers. They looked through Robert without seeing him, the way people look through homeless individuals on city streets. He was furniture to them, part of the institutional landscape, no more remarkable than the metal shelves or fluorescent lights. One day in 2019, a young volunteer was organizing a DVD collection when she came across an old copy of Chaplin, Robert's 1992 film, that had earned him an Oscar nomination. She held it up and asked the librarian, another inmate, who the actor on the cover was. "I don't know," the other inmate replied. "Some old guy, probably dead by now." Robert was sitting 10 feet away, cataloging returns, but said nothing. Who was he to contradict them? Robert Downey Jr., the actor, was dead. He died on July 16, 2001, when the judge's gavel fell and the handcuffs clicked shut. What remained was just Bob, inmate 24, 7,891, a number in a system that had forgotten why he was there in the first place. January 15th, release day after exactly 25 years, 0 days. Robert stands at the prison gates holding a plastic bag containing the possessions he'd accumulated over a quarter century. A few letters, some photographs, books, magazines. Nothing valuable. Nothing that connects him to the world he's about to rejoin. Nothing that proves he was ever someone who mattered. He's 61 years old, gray-haired, thin, wearing clothes donated by a charity that helps ex-cans transition back to society. The world that greets him is unrecognizable. Electric cars glide silently down streets. Smartphones have replaced human interaction. Social media has become the primary form of communication. An entire digital revolution happened while he was counting days on a calendar. He has no money, no connections, no relevance. The Screen Actors Guild revoked his membership in 2010. His IMDb page, when he finally accesses a computer at a halfway house, reads like an obituary. Last credit from 2001, followed by decades of silence that tell a story more effectively than any biography. The actor who replaced him as Iron Man retired from the role in 2019, after earning more money from Marvel films than most small countries' GDP. He's now a producer, a tech entrepreneur, a cultural icon whose influence extends far beyond entertainment. His face appears on magazine covers celebrating his business acumen, his philanthropy, his successful transition from actor to mogul. Robert applies for jobs at fast food restaurants, retail stores, anywhere that might hire a 61-year-old man with a 25-year gap in his resume. He doesn't mention his acting background. When employers ask about the gap, he tells them he was sick, which isn't entirely a lie. Addiction is a sickness, and prison is a kind of forced recovery, even if the recovery doesn't always take. 6 months after his release, Robert lives in a studio apartment in a part of Los Angeles that didn't exist when he was sentenced. The neighborhood has been gentrified, rebuilt, populated by young tech workers and aspiring influencers who have no memory of a time when he mattered. Rent is 3 times what it was in 2001, paid for by wages from a job stocking shelves at a grocery store in Riverside. He watches the new Marvel movie sometimes on a tablet provided by social services. The franchise has evolved beyond anything he could have imagined. Dozens of characters, billions in revenue, a cultural phenomenon that defines modern entertainment. The actor who took his role is now considered one of the greatest casting decisions in film history, the man who saved Marvel and launched the most successful franchise ever created. Entertainment blogs occasionally publish Where Are They Now? Articles that mention Robert in passing, usually in the context of cautionary tales about addiction and wasted talent. The comments sections are filled with people who barely remember him, who know him as a footnote to someone else's success story. Robert wonders sometimes what would have happened if the judge had shown mercy, if he'd gotten one more chance, one more opportunity to prove he could overcome his addiction and honor his talent. Would he have been strong enough? Would he have been ready? Would he have had the courage to become the hero he was meant to play? The questions are academic now. The life he might have lived belongs to someone else. The redemption arc he might have experienced became someone else's story. The billions he might have earned paid for someone else's retirement. The cultural impact he might have had enriched someone else's legacy. But there are moments, rare quiet moments, when he's walking through the city or sitting in his small apartment, when Robert Downey Jr. almost remembers what it felt like to be someone who mattered, almost remembers the feeling of walking onto a set, of inhabiting a character, of believing that talent and hope and second chances were enough to overcome anything. Those moments don't last long. They're interrupted by the need to punch a time clock, to pay rent, to exist in a world that has no use for who he used to be and no interest in who he might still become. At 61, Robert Downey Jr. is free in all the ways that don't matter and imprisoned in all the ways that do. Free from concrete walls, but trapped in irrelevance. Free from bars, but confined by age, obscurity, and the weight of choices made decades ago. He has served his sentence. He has paid his debt to society. He has been rehabilitated in all the clinical, measurable ways that prison systems use to define success. But rehabilitation, he's learned, is different from redemption. And freedom, he's discovered, is not the same thing as getting your life back. The judge was right about one thing. Society got the protection it deserved from his choices. What the judge couldn't predict was that protecting society from Robert Downey Jr. meant protecting Robert Downey Jr. from himself, from his potential, from the possibility that second chances sometimes lead to third acts that are more beautiful than anyone dared to imagine. In another universe, another timeline, another courtroom, a different judge showed mercy. In that world, Robert Downey Jr. became Iron Man, saved the universe, inspired millions, and proved that falling down is only tragic if you don't get back up. In this world, Robert Downey Jr. punches a time clock at a grocery store in Riverside, California, and goes home to a studio apartment where he watches other people live the life he was supposed to have. Justice, he's learned, is not always just, and time served is not always time that can be recovered. The man who might have been Tony Stark now stocks shelves and counts inventory, invisible to a world that once knew his name but has long since forgotten why it mattered. 25 years, a quarter century, a lifetime sentence served one day at a time, one choice at a time, one lost opportunity at a time. The only suit he wears now is the polyester uniform of a grocery store employee. The only armor he has is the emotional distance he's built to protect himself from the weight of what might have been. But every morning, when he looks in the mirror, Robert Downey Jr. sees not the man he became, but the shadow of the man he never got the chance to be. And in that shadow, faint but persistent, is the echo of a hero who never had the chance to save anyone, not even himself.